Hello, everybody.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello.
Good afternoon too to you. On behalf of the British Chamber of Commerce, it is a great pleasure to be a moderator of the workshop, and welcome to our video conferencing masterclass. We have actually a total of, in fact, over 100 registered participants in this workshop. So thank you to all of you for participating. My name is Cecilia Leong Faulkner. I am the founder and managing director of the British Theatre Playhouse, based in Singapore. I'm also a committee member of the Leadership, Talent and Professional Development Business Group of the British Chamber of Commerce. The Leadership, Talent and Professional Committee seeks to engage, inspire, and educate members to develop their businesses effectively by providing events, contents, and insights in three main areas. Firstly, leadership includes managing colleagues in agile and complex working environments, leading millennials and young professionals, and motivating and engaging teams. As for talent, we include recruiting effectively in Singapore, retaining and developing talent, and encouraging diversity. Professional development includes providing networking opportunities, developing future-ready skills, and sharing leadership experience through mentoring. The program for today's workshop is as follows, and please kindly switch on your video during the session. The keynote speaker will give his presentation for around 60 minutes, and after that, there will be a simple assignment where we will place all of you in breakout rooms for 10 minutes. Then we will all get back to the main room to go through your assignment. Last but not least, if anyone has any questions, Robin would be pleased to answer them at the end of the session. Please use the chat to submit your questions. So without further ado, may I briefly introduce you to our keynote speaker, Robin Kermode, who is one of Europe's leading communication coaches working globally with CEOs, senior executives, politicians, media personalities, and corporate teams. He is a popular keynote speaker and author of the best-selling book, Speak So Your Audience Will Listen. His podcast, The Art of Communication, has over 10,000 listeners. Robin has been an actor for over 40 years, and that's how we met. And is a recognizable voiceover artist. He is the MC of the ATP World Tour Finals each November at the Arena in London. He is also a respected media commentator, contributing to a wide range of newspapers, and is a leading body language expert for The Telegraph, The Guardian, and the Daily Mail. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome Robin Kermode.
Cecilia, thank you very much indeed, and welcome everybody. That's a very kind introduction written by myself, so I wouldn't believe any of it. But yes, so my name is Robin, and I've been an actor for many years, and now I'm a communication coach, and I work with senior politicians and CEOs around the world. And of course, once this pandemic started, there was a sudden rush to understand how we can connect with people via video conferencing, because that's what most of us are having to do a lot of the time. So the challenge, I think, with this is that what we're trying to do is we're trying to recreate what would be a normal human meeting. So how do we do that? So if, for example, we were having this meeting, lovely to see, I think we have just over 100 people today, but if we had everybody in a meeting room, like a big sort of boardroom table or a small room, and normally at the side of those rooms, maybe there's a table and it has teas and coffees on it and maybe a biscuit or a banana or something. And maybe you think, I'll go and get myself a cup of coffee. So you still listen to me, you wander over, you pour yourself a cup of coffee, and you continue to listen as you're walking. Now, if nobody thinks that's rude, I could even do the same thing. I could carry on talking to you, wander over, pour a coffee, carry on talking. You know what I'm doing. It doesn't seem rude. But if for some reason I suddenly get up now and leave the screen, you've no idea where I've gone, and it looks incredibly rude because you think, well, where's the person gone? So the trouble is we feel locked. We feel locked a bit like a photo booth. So we have to find a way of not feeling that we're in a photo booth sort of like this, sort of stuck like that. And we have to try to recreate what a normal conversation will be like. And I think the biggest thing we have to look at really here is humanity, because this is a very, very technical medium. So we have the sound. So the sound of my voice is not the sound of my voice that you're actually hearing, of course, because you're hearing it through the microphone, through the it's compressed, it's squashed into a sort of MP3. It comes out of the other side and it's played through your speakers. So the way that you hear my voice is not the same as if you were hearing it in reality, in a room, if we were having a coffee together. So we have to try to look at all the ways we can make sure that our natural humanity comes across through this technical medium. So that's what we're going to look at today. Basically, how we can connect with people and have human conversations in this very, very technical medium. That's what we're going to look at today. But first of all, I've made a short video for you. It's just over a minute long, and it's looking at all the things that people are doing wrong and that we all did wrong at the beginning of this this pandemic. And we need to maybe just aware that we don't make these mistakes too often. So if I just share the screen now, and I'm going to play this video now. So here we are.
Video calling from home. What could possibly go wrong? This is an interesting one. It's the hand leaning across the screen shot. We can always go for the nostril shot, or we could go for the slightly too close Silence of the Lambs look. This one seems to be a popular option. Or we could go for the halo effect. So here we are with a bit of dramatic side lighting. There's the merry-go-round shot, which is where people use this and they walk through their houses trying to get a cup of tea, and they ultimately, of course, we want to be relaxed when we're talking to the camera, unless we have interruptions. As I'm about to have a video call with an important client, I thought I'd come down into the basement where I won't be interrupted. I'm on a call! No, you're right, it is serious, and we should take it very seriously. Excuse me, there's just somebody at the door. 1 second. Question now is, how do we say goodbye? Bye, bye, bye. Or we do this one where we try to find the off button. Sorry guys, can I jump in here? I've realised I've only got 1% battery left, and there's something really important that I wanted to say. I think it's going to affect...
Okay, so we've all seen quite a lot of those things, and I think that the most important thing for me is the screen position, the lighting, and the sound. The screen position, the lighting, and the sound. That's basically how we set things up. Once we've set things up, then it's our responsibility to look at the humanity and the way the language we use, our body language, our vocal language, our voice, our eyes, what we say. We can look at all that in a minute. But first of all, let's look at how we set up. So what I've done for sort of speed here, because I want to get through quite a lot of stuff today. If we have a quick watch of this video, it's about 2 minutes long, and I've done a video looking at the screen position, the sound, and the lighting. So let's have a look at that, and then we'll all come back together and we'll have a little discussion around this. So here we are.
So here I am, leaning with my elbows on the desk. The trouble is, of course, I'm going to be far too close to the screen. But if I come back, sit upright, further away from the screen, that's a more comfortable distance from the screen. The only problem now, of course, is I do have a ceiling lamp on my head. So maybe I'll adjust the laptop screen here. What I've done here is I've lifted the laptop higher on a small stool. You could do it on a couple of books if you like. But what it does mean is that the camera now is more like at eye height. I think we have a better shot here with the camera more at eye level. But of course, I'm looking at myself on the screen here. And of course, if I lift my eyes up to the camera, then you get this look where I'm looking directly into the lens. Well, here, as you can see, I have the luxury of a window in front of me, which is going to light me from in front, of course. And what that means is I can rely on natural light. And let's have a look at what that looks like on the screen. Well, not bad. nice to have the natural light coming at me through the window. Now, that's option one, using natural light. Option two is when we want to maybe augment that, or maybe we don't have the natural light and we have to use the internal light. So now let's try turning on the overhead lights and see what that does to the shot. Well, yes, it has brightened up the room. Great. It's left a slight halo effect on the ceiling. So I'm going to bring the laptop down a little bit here, just to say there. What happens if you have no external light and the internal lights aren't enough? Well, this is what I would recommend. It's a semi-professional circular camera light. It comes with a little stand, as you can see there. You can buy it online for under £50. It's dimmable, so even on a day like today, which is a little bit overcast, I'd probably use a tiny bit of the lamp. I'd probably dim it very low. But on days when it was dark, or maybe in the evenings, or if I didn't have a window in front of me, I would definitely use the circular camera lights. I'm using the sound of the computer screen at the moment, but let's try with headphones in. Okay, so here we are with one Apple headphone in. I can hear myself in my ear, which is interesting, of course, and useful. Okay, so here we are with the full airline pilot book. How's that sounding when I play it back? We'll have a listen. It sounds okay in my headphones, they're a little bassy. So this is an alternative. This is to use an external microphone plugged into the computer, obviously. So this is the sound from the plugged-in microphone. Ultimately, we have three choices with sound. We can use the sound built into the laptop itself. This can sound a little echoey sometimes. We can use a variety of headphones, but they can sometimes look a bit odd. Or we could plug in an external microphone like this one into the laptop. Okay, so screen position, sound and lighting. So screen position there, I think it's really good if you can lift your laptop. So have a look at your own screen. Have a look at yourself on the screen now, if you can see your own image there. You may not be able to see it, but next time you're able to see it, have a think. If you can lift it up. So I have my laptop here today on two hardback books. So it's about sort of this high up. What it means is I'm avoiding all this kind of shot like that. The reason that's important is that all communication, as you know, all communication is about equal status. So normally we sit on the chairs of the same height, which means we're normally looking at the same height, the same eye level to somebody. So we're having a conversation with them. We're not putting ourselves on a high chair and putting themselves on a low chair, unless you're one of those irritating bosses of old who used to do that at interviews. But basically we should be on equal status, which means the camera should be at eye height. So I'm looking into the camera lens at the moment, so straight into the lens of the camera, which is, so I have my laptop here, which is a MacBook here. At the top of my picture, I have a little dot and a little green dot and a black dot, which is the camera. So I'm looking directly into the camera. So as I said on the video there, if I choose to look at some of the images lower down on my screen here, and I look to the faces of you, or the faces of people I'm talking to, of course, my eyes, I feel I'm talking to you because I can see your faces, but actually it's not as effective as if I look into the lens. So we're going to look in a second about how we connect with people through that. So I think the screen position, so just experiment next time with lifting your laptop up. Maybe you have done already, but I would say lift it on a shoebox or a couple of hardback books, lift the laptop up. That's a start. Secondly, sound. So today, as we had there, so this is the microphone I got in here today. This is a microphone. I'm going to give you a link afterwards, later on in this session, to all these products. Not that I'm on commission, but just sort of to send you a vaguely where you can buy any of these things if you wanted to. So microphones like this cost probably about £100 sterling, I would say, something like that, maybe 50 to £100. The USB mounted, so they go straight into the USB. Just to show you now, if I unplug the microphone here, so this is now the sound of the laptop. I'm carrying on talking at exactly the same level that I was talking at before. And this is the sound from the computer laptop. I'm going to put in the USB in again now. So I plug that in. In a second, that will cut in. And you should be able to hear the difference now that's cut in. So the difference between having a microphone plugged in and using the sound of the laptop, I think is quite noticeable. And if people are going to listen to you for a while, it's helpful if your voice can be as clear as possible. And obviously that's helpful. Now here, in terms of the setup today, I'm in my dining room in London, and we have French windows to the side here. So if I can just sort of turn the laptop around here. So if you can sit for moving around, if you can see that. So we have French windows on that side, which basically means here,
I only have light from one side. The only reason the shot is working is that I have a camera light on my left, which is right there. Now, if I turn that camera light down here, just to show you, that's what the screen would look like. So that to me is it's a slightly blurry image because there's not quite enough light. And if I just turn the camera light up here a little bit, I can overdo it, of course, and it's too much, but because it's on a dimmer, I can just bring a little bit of light in there, and then suddenly the shot looks fine. So I'll get it to there. There we go. So we have options, basically. A lot of people have said to me, during this time that they're working from home and the only room that's available to them is a spare room, maybe where they have light from one side or light from above or whatever. There are always ways around it. If I could just share a little picture here with you. This is an image here. So there are two options here. You can have the big camera light, which is probably about 20 inches wide, the big one on the right here. On the left, I've got two smaller ones, which I'm not using today. These ones are only about £20 sterling. They're not very expensive. They plug into the USB, and you can have one on each side or just one as a desktop. So there are lots of options, very inexpensive options, just to make your picture much cleaner if you need that. The other thing, there are of course great settings on Zoom, which you probably do know, but have a fiddle after this session. If you go down to the bottom left-hand corner, you have a mute button and you have a little video button. And to the right of the video button, there's if you click on that, you've got settings, various settings there. And if you go into video settings, there are two settings that are worth looking at. One is the adjusting for poor light. So you can do a manual thing on that. And I've adjusted today because today in London, it's pouring with rain. It's a very, very dark day. So I've adjusted my camera to give me a bit more light. If I didn't do that, the image will be very grainy. The other thing that's worth looking at the video settings is a wonderful thing called, which you can click, and it says, touch up my appearance. And if you want to take 10 years off you touch up your appearance. And it's kind of, I suppose, the equivalent of putting a Vaseline over the lens or a sock over the lens they used to do in old Hollywood pictures with the movie stars. So if you want to touch up your appearance and take 10 years off, the settings are all there, bottom left, just by the side of the video camera there. So I want to do one thing before we go into a breakout room, and I want you to ask. I'm going to set you a couple of things to do, but before we do that, I just want to look at eyes, because I think we are all, I mean, across the world, going to have a problem with our eyes if we spend as much time as we currently do on video conference calls, because we're working from home, we tend to work on the computer or actually on a video call, which means we have the brightness of the bulb of the computer into our retina full time, maybe 5, 6, 7 hours a day. I don't think this is going to be good for us long term. So when you're on a video call like this is a tip that I discovered early on, and it's really good. If you go to your brightness settings on your screen, and if you turn the brightness down to about 70%, so you can still see, but just take it down to about 70%. Just try that now. What happens is you can still see everyone, you can still see the screen perfectly well enough for a call, but you haven't got the bright lights in your eyes. And I think this is going to help save our eyes a bit, because if it's too bright, because normally we set the screen for the brightness of when we're typing and when we're working. But if we take it down a little bit on video calls, it just gives us a chance just to rest our eyes a little bit. So that's one thing. The second thing is a little eye exercise, and this is an exercise I do before I ever do a call. So if we try this together, it'd be quite fun. It takes about 30 seconds. So what I'd like you to do, if you're wearing glasses, you might just want to slip your glasses off. Basically, we're going to warm our palms up, and we're going to put the warm palms over our eyes. It's very simple. So if you rub your palms together, warm your palms up, and then what we're going to do is we're going to put these warm palms over our closed eyes. So if you close your eyes now and put the warm palms over your closed eyes. So it's nice and relaxing. And so suddenly your eyes have a chance to not have the brightness that they have all day on the computer. So obviously you'll have little flashes of light, sort of remembered light on your retina, but basically you're in darkness. Now, if you take your eyes down, sort of away from the screen, so keep your eyes closed, take the palms away, keeping your eyes closed so they adjust a little bit, and now open your eyes again. So that's the whole thing is about 30 seconds. But what it does is it softens your eyes. And the trouble is if we spend too long looking at screens, we can look a bit manic if we're not careful. We look a bit sort of hyperactive. So I think if we're trying to create the sense of connection, human connection down this technical medium of video conferencing, I think one thing we want to do is we want to have kind eyes and a kind voice. Kind eyes and kind voice. And the reason for that is that if we can start to be really, really human this end, by the time it goes through all the compression and it comes out of the computer screen your end, there's a chance then that the humanity might actually come through. But if we don't actively look for kind eyes, kind voice, and sort of a soft body language, if we don't do that, we end up with this kind of slightly formal sort of talk like this, and it's just straight down the lens. So we want to really avoid that, and that's down to us to create this sense of calm. I remember bumping into the British Airways chairman, Willie Walsh, at a party once a few years ago. And I said to him, do you know that voice that airline pilots have? I said, do you teach that at British Airways? Because I can't believe that all pilots were born with that voice. And so because any plane, whichever airline you get on, all pilots seem, you get on the plane, and you hear the pilot saying, as your captain speaking, we're flying at 35,000 feet, super smooth. And it's this kind of voice. And you think, they weren't all born with that voice, right? So I said, do you teach that voice? And he said, no, we don't. He said, and forgive my language, this is him speaking. He said, you can't have the pilot saying, and it's your captain speaking, we're flying at 35,000 feet. Oh my God, that's high, right? Right? They have to have done it before. So he said, if you think about it, there's no need for the pilot to talk to the passengers. Apart from one thing, they have to talk to air traffic control, of course, but they talk to the passengers only to create a sense of calm. That's the only reason they do it. They're basically saying, subliminally saying, there's a human being up here. We know what we're doing. Relax. It's okay. So even if the plane is bouncing around, he said, you need a pilot to say, sit back, slight bit of turbulence. I've seen far worse than this. Have a gin and tonic. You'll be all right. And we kind of think, okay, the pilot's not panicking, so it's okay. But he said, if ever you're on a plane and you hear the pilot saying, I think you should strap yourselves in, right? We know we're dead, right? We're all screaming. So we can't have that. So if you think there's a continuum line between the super smooth and the panicky, we want to be more on the super smooth end. Not super smooth as in sort of like a smooth radio DJ, not in that sort of sense, but in the sense of creating calm. So I think the way that video conferencing works best is if we can create this sense that we're actually having a conversation together. And that, I think, involves giving ourselves a little bit of space. So normally, if we were having if individually, one of us, we were having a coffee together, we would adjust our position every now and then. We take a sip of coffee, we move in our chair, we cross our legs, maybe we lean forward, we move about. So we need to give ourselves a little bit of space to behave normally. And if we're too close up here, there's no space to move. So I think the ideal position is this, which is about, as you can see how I've set it up now. This gives me space to be able to move my hands if I want to, cross my arms, I can lean back. What we don't want to do is to lean back too much. A lot of politicians in the UK, and I haven't been able to see politicians abroad on Zoom calls, but on the news at the moment, they're interviewing a lot of people inevitably from their homes or their offices on video conference. And a lot of politicians are doing this. They're leaning back in their chair, and it's an incredibly sort of arrogant position to be in, because everything is going backwards, and it's just a kind of, do I really need to do this sort of look. I think the best position to sit on a video call is this. If you push your chair away from the screen, so right away from the screen, you can see my chair there, and bring your bottom right on the front edge of the chair. So you're sitting right on the front edge of the chair there. And this position here, so just try that now. If you push your chairs away from the screen and you bring yourself right on the very, very front edge of the chair. So if you can see here, if I show you here, that my chair, it's that far away from me because I'm sitting right on the front edge of the chair. But most importantly here in this position, I have my feet flat on the ground. This is the best position for your voice, always. So feet flat on the ground and sitting on the front edge of the chair. Now in this position here, you look like you want to be there. In this position here, I look like I couldn't give a monkey. So this is not helpful. this looks much better, this is too close. So I think this is about the right sort of distance here. But it also, now the reason this is good for your voice is that it helps your spine. If I cross my ankles, so my feet are flat on the ground at the moment, if I cross my ankles, this is what happens. That's what happens. Basically, everything collapses. So if you have your feet flat on the ground, it helps your spine, and it means your voice is going to be better. I'm going to give you 2 voice exercises today, which I give most of my clients. I was coaching a guy recently who was up for election in the UK for Prime Minister. We had 7 candidates, I think it was, and my guy that I was coaching, I was giving him, and I gave him exactly the same voice exercise I'm about to give you now. And I watched him on television for the first time afterwards, and he phoned me up and he said, "Robin," he said, "were you watching me?" He said, "I did the voice exercise." You know? I said, "I know." So you can hear it in the voice. So there are 2 voice exercises. If you wanted to change your voice, if you wanted to develop your voice, you can do this in 1 week. If you just do these exercises for 1 week, and it literally changes the sound of your voice. So this is it. First of all, we were taught, basically, when I was a young actor, we were taught, if you want an audience to believe you, you have to do 2 things physically. You have to breathe into your emotional center, and you have to have an open throat. So you have to breathe into your emotional center and have an open throat. So that begs the question, where is our emotional center? Now, if I said to you, it's the same on every single human being. And if I said, where is your emotional center? Most people would say head, throat, heart, chest, solar plexus, and stomach. Those are the most common things people say. None of them are correct, but most people would say those are the emotional center. The thing is, those places those are the places that show the response. So, you know, we can have a headache if we get emotional, our voice goes cracky if we get emotional, our heart rate changes, our breathing rate changes, our stomach it feels a bit churned. But the emotional center is lower than that. The emotional center is in the gut. So the belly button here, gut, right down there, low, low, low. So that's the same. If you think of you know, yoga, gym, Pilates, martial arts, everything is the core. So that's the core there. So a strong core and breathing from there actually makes it sound like you believe what you're saying. So an audience, when they're listening to you, they can choose to agree with you or not agree with you. But if you breathe into your emotional center, you're much more likely to sound like you mean what you're saying. And that's what we're after. The next thing we want to do is to make sure that we have an open throat so that the sound from here doesn't get tight here. Most adults have a slightly tight throat. We need to open the throat. So these 2 exercises help us breathe into our emotional center with an open throat. If we do that, we have a kind voice. And if we have kind eyes and a kind voice, we're more likely to connect on a human level. So these are the exercises. If you bear with me, do these exercises with me because they're really, really good. So if you put your hand below your belly button, so belly button here, hand there, right in the gut. So you're sitting forward on the chair, feet flat on the ground with your hand on your stomach here. What we're going to do is very simple. We're going to do something called the fire breath. I'm going to do the mini version today. So this is the mini fire breath. It's an Indian breath technique, which some of you might have come across. Basically, we're going to breathe into the stomach for a count of 3 and out for a count of 3. In for a count of 3, out for a count of 3, 3 times. On the last out breath, where you have no breath left, we're going to hold the breath for 10 seconds. Then we're going to breathe in once and hold it again for 10 seconds. So basically, we oxygenate the body, then we hold the breath, breathe in once and hold the breath again. And the reason that works is it just reminds them, it's a muscle memory, it reminds the muscle that that's the place to breathe. It's also incredibly, it's a very, very good meditation technique. I do this every morning. So I do the long version, which is 40 breaths in and 40 breaths out, and then I hold it for 2 minutes and breathe in and hold it for 2 minutes. So you can sort of develop into a meditation, but the mini fire breath is really good. If you did this takes about 90 seconds. If you did this before a video call, I promise you your voice would change. That's why I think it's important. It also affects the pace in which you speak, but it also makes you sound more human. So 90 seconds to be more human. How good is that? So here we go. So hand on your lower stomach. So we're going to breathe in. I'll count you in. It's quite nice if you close your eyes, actually, because it's quite relaxing. So we'll do it together. Are we all ready? Hands on your lower stomach. And we're going to breathe in, 2, 3, out, 2, 3. Keep the hand moving. In, 3 and out, 2, 3, and last time, in, 3 and out, 2, 3, and hold the breath there. One breath in, hold the breath. And let go. Okay, so really good. So 3 breaths in, 3 breaths out, hold the breath for 10 seconds, breathe in once, hold the breath for 10 seconds, less than 90 seconds, and you've really calmed the whole system down. I would really recommend doing that before every single video call. We have to, I know I'm banging on about this, but I think if we don't, this is the core really, is, you know, we're trying to recreate what it would be like if we were there in person, and that means we have to be human when we do it. So that's the first thing, is the fire breath here down in the breath. Now we have to open our throat. This is the second bit. Now this is the most ridiculous voice exercise in the world, and I do apologize for doing it in close up here, but this is the way to do it. So I'm going to, I can't believe I'm doing this on camera. I'm going to stick my tongue out and count from 1 to 10. That's it. Now you'd think, does that make a difference? Well, the answer is it does. And the reason is this. If I show you from the side here, if I stick my tongue out here, what happens, of course, I stick my tongue out. Now the back of the tongue, right, is forced forward, which means that the tube, the air tube, is basically widened. So the back of the tongue comes forward, which means you have a wider tube. If you have a wider tube, of course, it's going to, like a musical instrument, it's going to change the sound of your voice. So for all the ladies joining us today, you're not going to end up with a male voice if you do this, but your voice will be emotionally connected with an open throat. But I'll demonstrate it now. So my voice is sounding okay this morning. It's morning in the UK here. It's, what is it now, 9:30. If I'm going to do the exercise, so I'm going to stick my tongue out and try to count from 1 to 10. Now, obviously it's hard with your tongue in your mouth, but I'm going to try and do it. And so if I demonstrate it, you'll see what I mean. And then afterwards, I'll speak and see what happens to my voice. This is quite weird, actually, this one. So here we go. So, but you really have to stick it out. You can't half do this one. So apologies for doing it. I might even sit back a little bit so it's not too scaring the horses. Right. So here we go. And anyone who's just joining us, I think we've got Dave just joining us now. So he's wondering what on earth's going on. But anyway, he'll have to make that mind up. So here we go. So as far as I can. So here we go. So really got to try to do this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can hear the difference in the voice. Now, for the ladies here, you're not going to end up sounding like this. But Cecilia, when she was introducing me, she said one of the jobs I do every November in London at the O2 Arena, which is a 20,000 seats arena, I introduce the top tennis players. So we have the ATP World Tour finals. So I introduced Federer and Djokovic and whatever. I would always do that exercise before I introduced one of those players. So if I'm going to go on the tannoy, and I'm going to go, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the world number 1. Of course, I'm going to do this because that's going to help my voice. So if you want to transform your voice, get your breathing from your emotional center with an open throat. Those two things, you can transform your voice in a week. What I would say, if you really want to do this, if you did the tongue exercise there, the 1 to 10, if you do that 6 times a day for 1 week, you change your voice. 6 times a day for 1 week, you will change your voice. I offer you that. And then obviously you want to keep doing it. So I've been doing it for 40 years now since I became an actor. So life makes us tight. Life makes us tense. If we have video call after video call after video call, we end up thinking, oh, right, here's another call. And we start the call not clean. We start the call with all the debris from the previous call and all the tension from the previous call, and they build up during the day. So you can end up being perfectly, you're feeling all nice and friendly. You go, hello, you join a call, and somebody else says, yes, good morning, right? And because it's their 15th call of the day, and you're thinking, I haven't done anything wrong. And suddenly I walked into a maelstrom of tension. So what we need to do, I think, is to try to be disciplined and do something like the fire breath, which is, as I say, 1 minute, 90 seconds between calls, just to clean ourselves. So when we start the next one, we're fully present and we're there. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to go into some breakout rooms, and I'm going to share this little image with you here, which is this. So what I'd like you to do in the breakout rooms, and I think we're going to try to have small breakout rooms. So I think there'll be sort of 5 or 6 people in each one. And Sabina is going to set this up once I've finished this introduction here. And then you'll be sent a little admission thing. You click it and you say, yes, I want to join. A little invitation, you join, and then there'll be 5 or 6 of you in the group. And I'd like you to discuss with each other, and it's much easier than a large format with over 100 people on the whole call. So I'd like to introduce yourself. So your name, what you do, and your first paid job. This is the reason I've done this, is there's nothing worse than we don't want to hear somebody's CV, particularly on a call like this. What we want to do is just have something that's vaguely amusing that we can talk about. So for example, if I was doing this, I'd say, hello, my name's Robin. I'm a communications coach. And my first paid job was as a petrol pump attendant in the days when people turned up and you fill it up. And in those days, you actually had to wipe people's windscreens as well. So you got a free windscreen wipe from me, filling it all in, you took the cash and everything. So that was my very first paid job. So I think it's nice. It's also quite a leveler, because if we have some sort of entrepreneur billionaires on the call, it's quite nice to know that their first job wasn't quite so grand. So I wanted to introduce yourself, what you do, and your first paid job. Once we've done that, that's a sort of little icebreaker really, so everyone can get to know each other. And then in your groups, in the breakout groups, which is about a 10-minute session here, I'd like you to discuss what's the worst thing you've seen on a video call. So, and then we're all going to come back and share these. So what's the worst thing you've seen on a video call? And what's your biggest challenge that you've come across on video calling yourself? So, on the business meetings you've had, and even the family meetings you've had, but what are the biggest challenges you've found? So the worst things you've seen and the biggest challenges you found. So it might be worth, I don't know whether you can, I'll leave this up actually, this screen up there until we go. So introduce yourself, your name, what you do, your first paid job, and then you're going to discuss 2 things, the worst thing you've seen and what's your biggest challenge. So that's what we're going to do. So when we're ready, Sabina is going to send invitations out, and you're going to go into your breakout rooms. I might be able to come into the breakout rooms to say hello, just to check everything's okay. And in 10 minutes time, we'll all come back together and we'll share some of these responses. So I hope you had I had a fantastic breakout session. We had the A team, but I'm sure you had amazing people in your teams as well in your session. So hopefully we've got some feedback there. If on the chat function, what would be useful now is if you could just answer the 2 questions for me, which is what is the worst thing you've seen on a video call? I wonder if you could just share them on the chat function on the side. And great. And Sabina, you were saying about the volume. Was that my volume, or was that referring to something else, Sabina?
No worries, it was relating to the video, but no problem. Carry on, Robin.
That's fine, no problem. Thank you. That's fine. So I'm just looking down some of the so obviously some of the problems are people not turning their cameras on and off, and the mute. The mute is the one. So I've seen one. Somebody slurping noodles. Okay, that's quite a good one. And that really brings us into food. And we have Cecilia mentioned I have a podcast which is called The Art of Communication, and one of the episodes is on video conferencing, and in the podcast my wife and I chat. My wife interviews me, and we have a chat about it, and we came to slight disagreement because she said it was acceptable to eat a biscuit on a Zoom call, and I said I think it's totally unacceptable to eat a biscuit on a Zoom call, because I said you can drink water, you can drink, but I said you don't really want to be eating, because if the sound of somebody eating is picked up on a microphone, it's much louder. Now, the other thing I wanted to say about volume is this. The microphone is very, very responsive. And I rather, in cars, if you have a car that has a system where if you're on the telephone, it's an automatic sort of system, like a Bluetooth. So a friend of mine just bought a new Mercedes, a very smart car, and she phones me from the car and she goes, "I'm in the car." I say, you don't have to shout, right? Because so what she does is, because the microphone, she's driving here, the microphone is up here by the mirror, but because it's that far away, psychologically, she feels she has to shout at the camera, but at the microphone. But actually, It's designed, the engineers at Mercedes, I'm sure, are very clever, and they know where the driver's going to be sitting because they know where the seat is. So they know the driver's going to be that far away. So they build a microphone that is designed to work at that distance. So similarly, for example, if I have my phone here, my mobile here, if I'm talking in the phone, it's only about 1 or 2 centimeters away from my mouth. So psychologically, I know I don't have to project because the microphone's right there. But if the microphone on a laptop, which it is further away, now it's different if you have headphones, but if it's further away there, there's a tendency for people to project. And if we project, then we're not having a normal human conversation. So I think trust the microphone, really trust the microphone. And actually, the most common thing that I say to people on these calls, if I'm doing an interactive call, quite often I go into companies and I'll run sessions, say, for 15 people like this, but we'll make it very interactive and everyone else will speak and present. The most common feedback I give on video conferencing particularly is taking the volume down to about 50%. So most people, I think, are too loud on video conference calls because they don't trust the microphone. And if you're too loud, what happens is at the end of a day, you'll also damage your voice and strain your voice. But also, if I can demonstrate to you now, this is using my quiet voice, as it were. In other words, this is my natural voice when I'm not projecting. So if we were having a coffee together, this is kind of how I talk, and I'm trusting that the microphone will pick it up. But if I do what most people do, which is to project my voice now here, the voice now is not emotionally connected. It's quite a strident voice. I feel it's quite strong, but on the other hand, it's a bit teacher pupil. It's quite a kind of a loud, slightly annoying voice. But if I take it down and I literally just soften the voice a bit, actually it sounds more human. It sounds like I'm actually having a conversation with you. So just test your volume, but I would say trust the microphone because you can really take the volume down if you trust it. The other thing I meant to say about eyes is this. Obviously, we talked about looking into the camera lens, which is what I'm doing now, and then looking at the images of the people on the screen. Now, if I look at the images of the people on the screen, I'm not connecting as well as if I'm looking into the camera lens. But if I look in the camera lens, I can't see the people on the call. So I can't read the body language or see whether people have got it or whether they're listening. So I think there's a hybrid version that works well on video calls, and that's this, is you spend the majority of your time looking at the people's images on the screen. But when you have something important to say, and when you come to your conclusion, you lift your eyes up to the camera and you say, and I think this is my key point. In other words, you spend most of your time looking at the images, but when you come to your main point, you lift the eyes, just as you would if you were having a conversation with somebody. Because quite often, if you're having a conversation, you're not going to hold eye contact for an hour and a half. You know, this call's sort of an hour and a half. We're not going to hold eye contact for an hour and a half with somebody if we're having a cup of coffee. What we'd probably do is we'd think, say, yeah, somebody asked me a question, I'd think about it, and I'd come back and give my answer into their eyes. So that's what we can do here. We can use this as our escape from the camera, looking at people's faces, and come back into the camera when we want to make our point. The other thing I think is really good is to have a pen and paper straight below the lens, literally below the lens here. Now, what this means is I can do this, is it gives me a safe place not to look at the screen. So I want to be able to not look at the screen to give me a break, but also I need to look like I'm still engaged in the meeting. And I think this is it. So I look down here, I can make my notes here, and I'm making notes. I can look up occasionally here. And you can't see my desk, but you kind of know from my shoulders and from experience that actually I'm making notes here. So I could be writing my shopping list, you don't know, but it looks like I'm engaged in the meeting. This is the point. So I often do this, and you can even doodle, actually. It doesn't really matter. You can make little doodle shapes, whatever. But what it does is it gives you, it stops this kind of thing where everyone's a pupil back at school and we're all sitting being watched by the head teacher. So I think this just gives us a safe space down here. And I can still listen, I can look up, but it makes me look engaged. This is the important thing. If I do something else here on the desk, so you can't see my desk here, but you'll know from my body language what I'm doing, even though you can't see it. You know I'm checking my mobile. You know a text has come in and I'm checking it. You just know I am. And the reason you know it is this, is when the mobile is here, when it's on the desk here, if a text comes in, the light flashes, doesn't it? So what happens is you end up with a slight double take from the speaker. So they go, lean in, And you can tell from the shoulder what they're doing with their hand. So you don't want people to think that you're texting whilst you're talking to them, because it makes you look like you're not present. So again, if you have to, and I understand people are multitasking and whatever when you're working, have the mobile straight down below with your pen here. So you've got your pen here, you're looking up, you're making notes. If a text comes in, you can also check your text in exactly the same way. Nobody knows you're doing it, but keep it down here. What we're trying to do always is to make the other person, the other people, feel that we're engaged in the meeting. Because the secret of life, I mean, if you want to be very sort of grand about it, the secret of life is being present. That's all it is. It's being in the moment. That's the whole thing. Every Zen master, every Buddhist monk will tell you this. It's about actually enjoying, being in this moment, enjoying this moment, not worried about the past or worried about the future, or just in this moment. And that is the secret of life. Now, we want other people to feel that we're there, that we're with them in that moment. So when people talk about charisma and how, when I teach leaders how to develop their executive presence, or how they look like they have charisma, these kind of things, a lot of it actually is about being still and being present. So the reason I like the mini fire breath is that it slows us down, because we don't want to go too fast on a call. I think one of the biggest challenges on a call, though, is how we create a sense of flow. Because normally, if we had all of us in a meeting room and I was talking and somebody in the audience thought of a funny comment and said a funny comment, and they'd sort of say the funny comment out loud, it would get a laugh, I'd respond to it, we'd carry on. And it's kind of fun, because it's kind of how it goes. Nobody does that on video conferences, because if you think, oh, there's a funny comment, by the time you've leant forward, unmuted and said it, people don't quite know where it's coming from, and the moment's passed. So therefore people think, well, that doesn't work, so we won't do it. So now we have no sense of normal interjection going on. So it very much seems to be who has the ball, hand the ball to the next person, hand the ball to the next person, hand the ball to the next person. That's kind of the only way that these, in large groups, the only way that these calls can work, which means we have to be really, really careful about telegraphing to the audience when we've finished. So if we telegraph that we've finished, they can carry on, they can pick up the ball. But we need to sort of telegraph that in the way we do it. And there's something very simple that I would recommend here. And that's what I call the headline sandwich. It's the headline sandwich. And I came up with this a few years ago. And you can use this, by the way, if ever you have to make an impromptu speech. A few years ago, my mother threw a party. She's died now, bless her. But when this is a few years ago, and she had a party for my younger brother, who was at that time, he was 40 years old. And so she had about 100 people in her house, and out of nowhere, she grabbed her glass, like people do, and she went, quiet, thank you. She got the silence, and then she said, Robin is now going to make the speech. With no warning to me at all. She said, Robin is now going to make the speech. And by the way, Robin is a professional speaker. He's very, very good. Robin, off you go. I've now got 100 people looking at me going, oh, you think you're good, do you? Right, you show us then, you show us, come on. And they're all going, come on, this is a family event. I'm now completely exposed, thinking, I wish I'd been given some warning for this. But I thought, no, I'll use the headline sandwich. So basically what it is you put your key point first, you give your supporting arguments, and this is important, and you repeat it at the end. So you have a key point, arguments, key point, headline sandwich, basically. And so I thought, okay, it's my brother's birthday, so I needed something to say. So I thought, right, my brother is the best brother in the world. So I stood there and I said, my brother is the best brother in the world, and I'm going to tell you why. Now, everyone says, he's going to tell us why he loves his brother. Lovely. So there's a kind of focus. All the tension left, and they all went, lovely. They're all you've got them straight away. Then, of course, in an impromptu situation, I have no choice but to make it up as I go along. So then I say, well, of course, when he was 5 years old, when he was 10 years old, these kind of stories. And then what most speeches do is they fall apart. And instead of falling apart, all I need to do is to repeat the headline. So I just need to say to my brain, stop talking, repeat the headline. So I said, so that's why my brother is the best brother in the world. Thank you very much. And everyone said, what a lovely speech, Robin. Now, the thing is, it was completely impromptu, but it didn't feel impromptu because it had a top and a tail. So similarly with this, I was on a call with a potential client last week, and the CEO said to me, Robin, I'd like you to work with me and the board, but if we do work together, what is the most important thing you're going to work on? So I think in my head, right, I need what's my headline? So I said, I think voice is the most important thing I'm going to work on for these reasons. 1, 2, 3. So ultimately, yes, I think voice is the most important thing I'm going to work on. Now, the point about that is it's really clear to the other person when I've finished. They can come in and then we can create this sense of flow easily. If we don't do that, people are thinking, are they finished? Should I come in? And then it's this delay that stops the normal flow. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to recreate what it would be like if we were just together in a room. That's what we're trying to recreate. So it requires us to have kind voice, kind eyes, and be really clear about handing the ball back. The other thing that I think is important, and then we're going to come on to Q&A now. The other thing I think is important is if you're presenting for a short time, even if it's only for 5 minutes, if you're presenting on a call like this, be really, really clear where the changes of section are. So where the changes of section are. So if you have 3 sections, for example, much better to be able to say, so I'm just going to admit something there, much better to say, okay, we're going to talk about customers, suppliers, and the future. So let's talk about customers first. So I can put customers in an imaginary bubble over here. So let's talk about customers. Once I finish talking about customers, I can say, okay, so that's customers. Right, now suppliers. And it's really clear to the audience that I've moved. Once I've finished suppliers, I go, so we've done customers, we've done suppliers. What about the future? And now we're onto this bit here. So if you make the sections clear, it's easier for people to follow you. And because we're not in the room, we have to, with our body language, also help people. So I think we can sort of say, we can go, left, middle, and right with our hands even. Little things like that, which just makes it clearer. It also makes it clearer to us that we've changed section. So once we've finished about customers, we don't want to go back to that. We don't want to say, oh, by the way, I forgot something. We go, that's customers. Now we're on suppliers, and then we're on the future. And this makes it very, very easy for other people to follow us. So I think in a way, our thoughts need to be tighter, but our delivery needs to be very conversational. So this is the medium that really explains exactly where communication is in the 21st century. It's got to be incredibly authentic. If you think around the world, the way that people now don't trust politicians, almost everywhere in the world, if you do, all the polls show that people don't really trust their politicians anymore. Now, when I was younger, people did trust their politicians, but they don't anymore. And if they don't, one of the reasons is, I think, is they don't believe the authenticity isn't there. So what we've got to do is we have to be, so the really good ones, the sort of Obamas, the Bill Clintons, these guys, the people who are really, really good speakers, and Hillary Clinton as well, is we have to find a way of being sort of really, really authentic and natural, but we can't do that and have a sloppy message. So we can't have a very gentle delivery and a very gentle message because it doesn't cut through. And we can't have a very tight message and delivered very tightly because that doesn't work either. So we have to have a hybrid, which is we have a really clear message delivered effortlessly. And basically that means working out what our headline is. So if ever you have to present on a call like this, just, people often say to me in business, I have to present this PowerPoint, this deck or whatever, and it's somebody else's deck and I've only got 20 minutes and I don't have time to prepare. I said, you do. You just have to prepare in the right way. And what you need to prepare, I think, is what is your point? And if you don't know what your point is, we have trouble. And I remember coaching the CEO of one of the big, in the UK, we have 4 big supermarkets, and the CEO of one of them was my client. And he has 2,500 stores in the UK and 2,500 store managers, therefore. So he was giving a speech, or going to give a speech, to 2,500 people in this big conference, all his store managers. These are the people who run his business. And before I was preparing it with him, and I said, before we start on his speech, just can you tell me what your point is? And he said, well, I have lots of points. And I said, it's not good enough. I said, what is your point? He said, well, I don't know, I've got lots of points. And what he was going to do was to stand there and say, good morning, everyone, welcome. I'm going to speak for 20 minutes and then we'll have Q&A and then we'll bring on the CFO. I said, we can lose all that. I said, let's just get straight to your point. So I said, let's go through your speech and it'll be in there somewhere. So we listened to his speech, and about 7 minutes in, he said something and I said, that's it. That's your point. He said, yes, it is. I said, well, let's put it at the beginning then. So we can't have our main point in the middle. We have to have it at the beginning. So instead of doing what he was expected to do, which is good morning, everyone, hello, welcome, all that, he came on and he said, last Tuesday, a customer went into one of our stores and said this. I never want that to happen again. Now, he's talked for less than 10 seconds. He has the entire audience in the palm of his hand. And it's also very clear now. They're all panicking because they're thinking, was that my store? but the nice thing is that he has their attention because it's relevant to them. But also subliminally, it's very clear now that the whole of his message, his main point is that this is now about customer service. It's about how we engage with that's what he's going to do. Which means, of course, now he's got the headline sandwich set up. So at the end, he says, so if we make all the changes that I propose, that will never happen again. Thank you very much. It's come full circle. So it's super easy, this stuff, really. I think this is even more relevant. I mean, this was stuff that I was doing before video conferencing became the norm, but now this is the norm. I think it's really, really relevant, and it helps us to create this sense of flow. So I hope that's been helpful and a really nice time. What I'd like to do is just share with you quickly here before we go into Q&A, this slide here. This is a link to my website, which is robinkermode.com. And if you go to robinkermode.com/video, I've put a page up there, and on there, there's the videos we looked at earlier, but also links to various things like the camera lights and the microphones and various things. There's also, you can download my top 35 tips for video conferencing are there as well. So if you have a listen there, if you want to sort of follow up anything like that, robinkermode.com/video, and you can get the links to everything there. And if anything isn't covered in the Q&A and you feel like dropping me an email afterwards, then please feel free, and I'm happy to engage with you, of course afterwards, or even to come and work with your team or whatever. So I'm going to hand over to Cecilia, who's going to run the Q&A sessions, and then we can look through some of the chat things that have come up. So Cecilia, can I hand back to you for Q&A?
Thank you. Listen, thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for such an interesting workshop, Robin. There are some questions which I'd like you to answer. And one question from Mr. Michael Gilmore. And in this question, he asked, what's your opinion about virtual backgrounds? Okay.
There's no right answer to this one. I think it does depend on the limitations of your room, because in our breakout rooms, we had Mark and Stuart in my breakout room, and we were talking about the challenges you have when you're working from home and you maybe only have one room, or if you're even sharing they were saying some of their colleagues are sharing flats and things. They're all trying to have calls on the kitchen table. This makes it very difficult, and sometimes whatever your background is just not appropriate. It just doesn't work, and therefore I think virtual backgrounds can work. I think they can be, unless you've got quite good green screen and good camera, I think you can look a bit fuzzy and the edges disappear a bit. So it could look a bit sort of like a bad episode of Star Trek if we're not careful, sort of slightly beam me up, Scotty. So we've got to be a little bit careful of that. I think also it's a bit odd to sort of suddenly have yourself against Sydney Harbour Bridge when you're in Singapore. I think, well, why would you do that? I think that's odd. There was a client I was coaching recently, and he was a hedge fund manager in Norway, actually, and he had behind him on the wall, but he had his screen sort of like this, and on the wall sort of up here, way high, was what looked like a Picasso, and he was probably the sort of guy who probably could afford a Picasso. So I said, excuse me, I said, is that a Picasso? And he said, well, yes, it is, actually. I said, what, an original Picasso? He said, well, yes, it is. I said, oh, interesting. I said, the reason I'm mentioning is that I said you've got it sort of set. It was about up here, right, almost up here somewhere. I said, is it normally set so high? He said, no, I have rehung it for the Zoom call, so it sits above me on the Zoom call. I think rehanging your Picasso is a little bit over the top. I think backgrounds are fine if they're appropriate. I'll tell you what, there's a tip that I discovered, is that I wanted to do some videos for my website. In fact, if you go to my website, you can see them. And there wasn't really anywhere that was the right kind of background I wanted for the website, for the look of the website. So I went on to one of those Shutterstock, one of those sort of Photoshop sites, and I found an image of a very clean kind of office, kind of home, but very sleek. So I found this image and I had it printed on one of those roller banners you have for exhibition stands. So I got a 2-meter exhibition stand with this picture on. I pull it up, so I can actually, in our bedroom there, which we've got lovely French windows at the bedroom, the light's great, but I don't want to do a video in my bedroom because it looks ridiculous, of course, on the website. But I pull the blinds up, pull the roller blind up, I sit in front of it, and I do the videos, and you would think I'm in an office. And it's much, much better than the virtual background because there's no blurring. So basically, if you've got a background that doesn't work for you, for about $100, you can actually just get a screen made. So find a nice image, get it made up on one of those exhibition stands, and have that behind you. That's I think is a cleaner image than the virtual backgrounds. Virtual backgrounds are great, but they can be a bit blurry. Is the sort of short answer.
Lovely. Thank you, Robin. There's another question from Mr. Steve First Row, and he asked about headline sandwiches that you were giving us, some advice. How many headline sandwiches can you fit into one presentation?
Okay.
In one.
The answer is just one. I mean, you can use it in sections, but what I would say is basically you have to have one point. Just you've got to have one overall point. Actually, the one tiny little thing I will give, extra thing I'll give here is if you ever have to give information, what most people do is they give information. So they'll say, well, this slide shows or whatever, or they'll say the sales figures last year were $6 million. They just give the information, and the rest of us are thinking, is that good or bad? I don't know. So what we have to do is make it easy for the audience. So if you get in the habit of always giving an emotional context and then information. So the emotion and then information, people hear it differently. So if you said the sales figures last year, amazing, $6 million, we hear it better because we're not distracted by thinking, is that good, is that bad? So whenever an audience is worried and thinking, have I got this right? They're not listening to you. So make it super easy. Or the sales figures last year, not very good, $6 million, what are you doing? Right? So we kind of just make it easy for the audience. So I would say, give one overall, which is the headline sandwich, and you can have little ones in between, but just give an emotional context for that particular thing.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Robin. Here's another question for you.
Mm-hmm.
What do you recommend for people who don't have much to do in a meeting and they just sit there, sit still for a 1 hour call? What do you do in a situation like that?
Well, then I think you use the thing of having the pad and the pen here below you, and you take part in the meeting. If you have to be at the meeting, and the meeting is not actually relevant to you, but you have to be there for some reason, then you can sit here and write your Christmas card list. But you look as if you can still hit, but you look as if you're taking part. If you're most of the time, actually, we do want to be part of the meeting, in which case you can take notes. But I would say actually take notes. Just write down what people are saying here. Just write it down, because what it does is it gives you a focus. It also makes you concentrate, and it makes you look like you're engaged. So that would be my simple answer to that one. Because you don't want to sit there like this for an hour and a half, or you feel you have to try too hard. You have to, oh really, oh. You feel you have to almost sort of respond facially with what everybody's doing, and that's quite tiring after a while. It's a bit like, I mean, I don't know if anyone is, if you've ever been married, but imagine when you're married and you have the sort of photographs taken. I couldn't smile by the, I couldn't move my face the next day because I'd spent so much time smiling for pictures. My face was exhausted. And I think there can be a little bit of that on these calls. So I think to give yourself safe space where you don't have to react is here. This is your thinking in neutral space, and that gives you a break from the screen.
Lovely. Thank you so much. That's quite helpful, really. Another question that came in is, how do you shut someone up when you need to move on to the next speaker? How do you do that diplomatically? You
do exactly the same technique you would do if you were hosting Q&A in an actual event. And so if you're the speaker, and I've done this quite a bit, so you're the speaker, well, I probably have the microphone here or here. So I'm the speaker on the stage, and there's somebody asking a question that's actually not really a question, that carries, it's a bit like a sort of, they go on and on and on. What you do is you say, if you know their name, because normally they say, oh, it's David from Birmingham or something, and you go, okay, they're chatting away. And if you want to stop them, all you have to do is say their name. It's just like a child, actually. You say, David, I think, what? And everyone responds like a parent-child thing, and it stops them talking. Just say their name. So if somebody was shining on, I'd go, David, might I interrupt you here for a second? And they will stop. So the simple answer is say their name.
Robin. Mm-hmm. Next question.
Yes.
Wait, hang on a second. Okay. You've been given us, this is a question from Mr. James Close. And he asked, his question is, you've been giving us lots of great advice on how to make video calls more like being in a room with people. But are there things we can do virtually that we can't do face to face?
Oh, I always see. So what is the advantage of this? Well, I think one of the advantages actually is trusting the microphone. So one of the great advantages here is I can take my voice down. You can tell me whether you can hear me, but I'm going to take my voice down very, very quietly now. I'm using almost no voice at all here. So can you still hear me all clearly on this? Is this working enough or not? So I'm using almost no voice at all. But what it does is it gives me the chance to be incredibly authentic, because I can take the volume right down. I couldn't do that in a room. I couldn't, if we were having a coffee in a coffee shop, I couldn't speak at this volume because you wouldn't be able to hear me. But actually here, there is a chance of pulling people in. And so it's a bit like, you know, the way that magicians do is they get everyone's attention for the whole audience, everybody here, everybody watching over here, everybody, all eyes over here, everybody here. So they kind of do that, and we can do that on a call. So we can, in a way, I think these calls can be very natural, and they're very natural if we just take the volume down at least to 50%. And I just noticed Mark asked a chat on the side here about the voice exercises, which is apropos of this really, and the tongue stretching one. If you did and Mark is saying how many times a day, if you count from 1 to 10, excuse me, 1 to 10 with your tongue sticking out, if you did that 6 times a day for a week, you change your voice. That's it. It's just a muscle. One thing here with water here. We haven't talked about eating and drinking. Eating, we said we don't like very much because it's confusing. I would turn the camera off if I had to eat, and certainly the sound. But drinking, if you do have to drink, don't rush it. And one of the things we learned on stage is that you don't want to rush it. Otherwise, what happens is you do this. I'll do it in slow motion for you. You bring the glass up here. You breathe in at the same time as you drink. You go, and if you breathe in at the same time you're drinking, what happens is the water goes down your windpipe and you choke. So what you have to do, actually, if I do it slow motion, is you get the glass to here, you breathe in, swallow, and breathe out. So actually you have to breathe in before you get the water there. But what you don't want to do is to rush it. There's nothing worse than if you're presenting thinking, I need to have a quick sip because I've got a little bit of a tickle in my throat, and so I can take a break like this. It makes it look manic. So much better to, when you get to the end of a section, you say to an audience, so have a think about that. Moving on to the next section. So drink, I would say the changes of sections if you do, but anything on a video camera that is repetitive gets annoying. So if you did this more than 3 or 4 times, you just say, please stop doing that. It's really annoying. So only 3 or 4 times. And the same thing if somebody does something, you know, with their hand, if they said, so it's really important that we do this. It's really important we do that. You think, stop doing that now, because now it's only 4 times and it's annoying. So basically, we don't want to do repetitive things, but we do want to create the sense of space that we have in a normal meeting. We should feel free to move around. We should feel free to change our position, you know, because we're trying to be natural here, so we can move. We don't feel we have to be like this the whole time. I think that's the problem.
Fantastic. There's another question. This is from Dawn Cole. How often should we do the breathing exercise that you recommended? And what are your thoughts about the voice quality using a headset as opposed to a proper microphone?
This is interesting. We talked a lot about this in the breakout room. The headset is necessary if you're in a property where you have, or an office or whatever, where you have more than 1 people on call. So you can't have everyone with their speakers blaring out, because that's disruptive to everybody else. So I have my speaker coming out today, so I'm hearing everybody on the speaker of my laptop, but there's no one else in this room, you know, my wife is working at the bottom end of the flat today, so it's not going to interfere with anyone. If I had 3 people around this dining room table here working on calls, I would have to have a headset. So I think there are chances. I prefer personally not to have a headset, just because I like the feel. I'm trying to create this sense of we're just being normal as opposed to having a headset. And I use the microphone. So those are my thoughts on it. I think the sound quality from headphones can be fantastic because the microphone is closer to your mouth. So I think the sound quality is good, very good on headsets. So I don't see there's a problem with that at all. It's just whatever look you want to have. I personally think that the big airline pilot things are a little bit over the top on a call. I know people have got very nice headsets and they want to wear them, but I think they can look a bit airline piloty. And I think that if we use the earbuds are fine, and the single cord is also fine, but it's just a point of preference. But I think following on from the airline pilot analogy, I think, you know, if we all consciously channel our inner airline pilot before a call. So I think before the call, the breathing exercise, that breathing in for 3 and out for 3, holding the breath and holding the breath again. I would do that before every Zoom call. I do it before every single call. So it's about a minute. Just means when I start, I'm sort of calmer and I'm not quite so manic. It just calms me down. I close my eyes, gives me a little bit of Zen space before I start a call. So I would say, in answer to the question, do that as much as you like, but I would say before every call. And then when you do get on the call, consciously with your brain say, okay, I'm going to try and create a sense of calm here, just like an airline pilot talking to the passengers or a surgeon talking to a patient. It's the same thing. On this call, relax. It's okay. We're flying at 35,000 feet. We know what we're doing.
Thank you, Robin. Okay, just one last question. I'm very conscious of time. We have only just a few minutes left. So we'll probably have a very, short question. And this is, how do I attract attention during conference, video conferencing?
Yes, I know. This is always a big thing, isn't it? It's the question of, do you put your hand up like in class, you know, when you're at school and you put your hand up like this? And so I'm not sure what the best thing is. I think the best thing to do is just to lean forward, actually. Because I think if you lean forward like that, it's because you can see, you know, if you're chairing a call and you've got lots of the images of people on the screen. At the moment, for example, I can only actually see about 7 people on the top of my screen because the way mine's configured. You may be able to see more than that. But if you, I think I just lean forward. I just lean forward and put my hand up very slightly here, sort of gentle thing like that. I think unmuting and coming in saying, Robin here, can I say something, is actually a bit shouty. So, because we want to try to create the sense of, as I said, the sense of humanity that we've been talking about. So I think a gentle sort of one of those sort of looks is fine. That's what I would recommend. I wouldn't necessarily go for the whole hand up.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you so much for answering all these questions. And so we come to a close, ladies and gentlemen. May I thank you very much for your active participation in this video conferencing masterclass. And I really hope that you enjoyed the program and got some very useful takeaways from Robin. So before we say goodbye, I would like to take this opportunity to draw to your attention to the upcoming events from the British Chamber of Commerce, which you might find interesting and you might wish to participate. The first one that's coming up is on the 22nd of October, and that's the impact of the US elections on UK and US relations. I'm going to look up for that one. I think I've enrolled for that webinar. That's on the 22nd of October, impact of the US elections on UK-US relations. On the 28th of October, we have a webinar on My Building Got Hacked. Very interesting. So take note of that, please. On the 28th of October, a webinar on My Building Got Hacked. And on the 11th of November, there is a webinar on unlocking true leadership with neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity, nothing to do with plastic surgery, but something to do with brain, how you use your brain to unlock true leadership. And that takes place on the 11th of November. And last but not least, in the month of October, we will have our 21st annual Business Awards. This is going to be a virtual award ceremony that takes place on the 29th of October, which I've already signed up. So please, I hope that you join us all there. And that's it for the month of October. So we hope to see you there. And you will soon receive an event feedback survey form, which will land inside your emails inbox. We would appreciate that you fill that in with your feedback. And once again, thank you very much. And until we meet again, stay safe, keep well, and goodbye. Thank you.